Well, welcome back. Well, Florida remains a hot state, and we are not just talking temperatures. Wealthy residents from heavily taxed blue states across the country, like New York and California, fleeing to Florida, boosting investment, tax, revenue, and job creation there. Florida gaining more than 110,000 residents between 2022 and 2023, and adding over $20 billion in aggregate income to this tax base in the state. Here's the governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, with me on Sunday. Watch. When you see these billionaires saying, bye-bye Florida, bye-bye New York, bye-bye California with your billionaires tax, I'm setting up a second headquarters in Florida. What has that meant for the state?
Well, I can tell you we're getting a lot of help with some of these leftist politicians and these other jurisdictions. You've chronicled it for years when I've been on about what's happened out of the Northeast. But I will tell you, in the last 9 months, the amount of wealth we've seen move from California simply because of the threat of this wealth tax has been unprecedented, certainly in Florida's history, but I would say probably in American history if you look at the type of people who have done it, and it's for good reason. They want to tax 5% of wealth. They claim it's billionaires, but these taxes will apply to people who are less than that. But even if it's just the high people, they're taxing your voting rights in a company. You may not even own the equity, and they're going to impute value to that. Then you're going to have to just write them a check, and then what are they going to do with that money? They're going to give it to public employee unions who run the state of California. So you can understand why people wouldn't want to be subjected to that. So we've seen that in a really big way. I mean, very, very significant people. And I think we have a good environment. I'm proud of what we've done. Don't get me wrong. Rule of law, low crime, education choice, no income tax, all that's important. But we are having help because they're doing destructive policies, and when people react negatively to them, they go back to the well and just do it again.
And joining me now is the founder, chairman, and CEO of the Peebles Corporation, Don Peebles, back with us. Don, great to see you. Welcome back. And I know you've got business in both Florida and New York. How do you see things?
Well, I think that Ron DeSantis said it pretty well. It's a shift, a seismic shift from New York, California, and other progressive high-tax states where those residents are leaving. And they're not just billionaires. They're entrepreneurs who are seeking better environments for their businesses. They're people who have families who are coming here because they believe it's a better place to raise their families. The quality of life is vastly superior. So Florida's driving a seismic change because of the high quality of life, and the politics are consistent with where voters are. What's interesting also is that Florida used to be a Democratic state for 50 years, and that changed in the second term of President Obama, and has continued to expand to where Republicans have a 1.5 million vote registration advantage against Democrats.
Yeah, so what has that done to the state of Florida at this point? I mean, tell us about the construction underway, how things are changing in Florida as a result of all of these new resources coming in.
Well, look, there's an old saying, it's better to be lucky than smart sometimes. The state of Florida and Ron DeSantis has benefited tremendously. For example, the economic growth as a result of the shift of businesses coming to Florida after and during COVID, and the way the state handled COVID has resulted in the ability for Florida to now discuss and are debating right now about eliminating or vastly reducing property taxes, the only tax that individuals currently pay. Right now, Florida has no state income tax. It will not ever have a state income tax for individuals. And that's one of the attractions for high net worth and high income earners coming to Florida, but also for other people seeing opportunity. But imagine they can potentially eliminate property taxes. That will significantly expand home ownership, when in these other cities and states like New York, for example, home ownership is nearly impossible in New York City today for the average resident.
Well, it's incredible because it's a complete opposite what's going on. I mean, in New York, you've got Mamdani wanting to raise property taxes. And in Florida, you've got DeSantis trying to do away with property taxes. He walked through his property tax proposal with me on Sunday, and here's what he said. Watch this.
The local level, which is where the property tax revenue goes, we've gone from local governments taking $32 billion in 2019 in taxes to now $60 billion. That's almost 100% increase in revenue. And look, part of it is people have moved here. Part of it is that property values have gone up. But homeowners need relief. And so it's my view that if you are a Florida resident and you have a homestead, we want that to be tax-free. And so that's our vision. That represents about 30% of the overall property tax revenue because they still tax investment property, commercial property. And so this ballot measure will do an opening salvo of raising it, the exemption to $250, adjusted for inflation so they can't play games. That will be 60% of Florida homesteaders tax-free. Then as they raise it, the legislature will be able to raise that and have a process to do that. Once you get to 500,000 limit, that's 92% of homeowners, and then on it goes from there. But if we don't give homeowners relief, Maria, by 2032, they're going to be taking in $83 billion. So that would mean $32 billion in 2019. 13 years later, it goes to $83 billion. That is not sustainable. And so this is really a historic opportunity to have more money in people's pockets and to actually have their home be their private property that the government just can't use as a piggy bank.
You know, I don't know. I don't even know how they're doing this in Florida, Don. I mean, you've got no state income tax. He's cutting property taxes. And you know, when I asked him that, he basically said this is a budgeting issue. I mean, in Florida, you've got a smaller budget for the entire state of 23 million people, a smaller budget than New York City has. And that's 8 million people. Cheryl, this is real money. Jump in here, Cheryl Casoni, when you take a look at this change and difference between Florida and New York on property taxes.
Well, certainly. And, you know, I'm interested to hear Don's take. It's great to see you, Don, on how this is going to affect these cities, because a lot of these local municipalities were pushing back on Governor DeSantis. I mean, the state legislature passed it. It's on the November ballot. That's already happening. But they're saying that they're worried about quality of life, whether it's fire or police. And when you've got this huge influx of residents into Florida, I'm curious if some of these local leaders had a point in saying they were concerned about the budget cuts. Although Governor DeSantis told Maria they've got too much in their budgets, which I thought was interesting as well.
Well, look, I think that what happens is if you look at New York City and you look at other northeastern cities or Southern California, for example, the more revenue that comes in, the more the politicians spend. Florida imposes discipline on spending in a number of structural ways. And so fundamentally, there's a structure that precludes runaway spending. What you're going to see, what Ron is talking about, is triple the revenue in a short period of time, in a little over a decade. That's a phenomenal increase, and that money shouldn't be spent. Florida's prospering, and what should happen as a result of prosperity, that the residents who are here should benefit from that prosperity. And that would mean if more revenue comes in, then there's less of a burden on the individual taxpayer. And I think that's what we're seeing happening here with this new legislation. Ultimately, I think that we'll get to a place in property taxes where it's a graduated system, so where you'll have different classes of property that put more burden on infrastructure, pay more, and that will ultimately be the case. But I think that ultimately you have to look at a way to where the prosperity is shared, and I think this is one of the ways to do that.
Yeah, Florida Democrat Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz, meanwhile, is facing backlash this morning after deciding to run in a newly redrawn South Florida district, which has been represented by a black Democrat for nearly 30 years. Don, your thoughts on this redistricting and its impact as well?
Well, if the Democrats thought they had a chance in a statewide race for governor this cycle, that's going to be the nail in the coffin. The most loyal constituency to the Democratic Party are African-American voters. And African-American voters have fought very hard to have representation in the U.S. Congress. And for Debbie Wasserman Schultz to run in that district because she's afraid to run in her own district because of redistricting, is deplorable, to use a Democratic phrase. And I think it's just so disrespectful to the hard-fought battles, and it will hurt the Democratic Party because African Americans in Florida, where I am right now, are questioning the loyalty and the commitment that the party has to a black agenda at all. And I think this is an opening for Republicans again to reach out. And as you know, President Trump got historic numbers of votes from African-American voters. And so I think what you're going to see here is probably more of that shift.
All right. We will be watching all of that. Don, always a pleasure to see you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Don Peebles joining us. Stay with us. We'll be right back.